There are genetic ghosts hiding in your biology. We usually picture our ancestors as a single, clean line of modern humans, but your body contains evidence of a much stranger past. If your ancestry is from outside of Africa, between 1 and 4% of your genome is inherited from a different branch of humanity. These were groups that evolved in Eurasia for hundreds of thousands of years before we ever arrived. For generations, textbooks told a story of pure dominance. The assumption was that Homo sapiens simply outsmarted the heavier, more primitive people they encountered and eventually replaced them entirely. The genetic data reveals a much messier reality. Our history involves 3 separate groups of humans, overlapping territories, and thousands of years of frequent, documented interaction. We are the product of an ancient biological merger. Our current existence is the result of these separate lineages meeting and blending into a single, unified population. 45,000 years ago, as Homo sapiens expanded into Eurasia, they found a continent that was already occupied. They had neighbors who had lived there for hundreds of millennia. These were the Neanderthals. Their brains were slightly larger than ours on average, and they were far from the brutes of popular myth. They controlled fire, planned complex tool-making techniques, and practiced ritual burials. Their bodies were perfectly adapted to the Ice Age, with thick bones and large nasal cavities to warm freezing air. However, they lived in tiny, isolated groups, often separated by impassable mountain ranges and glaciers. In 2010, the discovery of Denisova cave in Siberia introduced a third group to the story. We call them the Denisovans, an entire human species that science had completely missed. Our entire understanding of this species started with a single piece of a girl's finger bone, no larger than a thumbnail. From that tiny fragment, scientists reconstructed their entire genome. This means that for a massive stretch of history, Earth was home to 3 different versions of highly intelligent, tool-using humans, all living at the same time. To understand how these groups interacted, researchers used modern sequencing to extract DNA from ancient Siberian soil and bone. Denisovan DNA turned up in surprising places: a jawbone in Tibet, a tooth in Laos, and another fossil pulled from the bottom of the Taiwan Strait. This group lived everywhere from the freezing mountains to the tropics. In 2012, researchers analyzed an inch of bone from that same Siberian cave, labeled Denisova 11. The genetic results were so unprecedented that the team initially struggled to interpret the data. This individual was a first-generation hybrid. Her Neanderthal mother traveled thousands of miles east, and her father was Denisovan. His side was even more complex. His ancestors had already interbred with Neanderthals hundreds of generations before she was born. Finding a first-generation hybrid in a single cave suggests these meetings were a recurring, normal part of life. These species were constantly finding each other and starting families. Neanderthals and the Denisovans disappeared from the record about 40,000 years ago. This wasn't a sudden wipeout or a final battle. As waves of Homo sapiens kept arriving, these smaller populations were simply absorbed. Their lineages didn't end. They were incorporated into our own. That ancient DNA is still keeping people alive today. Tibetans and Sherpas possess a specific gene that allows them to thrive at 15,000 feet. They inherited that trait from the Denisovans 40,000 years ago. During the COVID-19 pandemic, researchers found that a specific stretch of Neanderthal DNA carried by millions of people reduced the risk of needing intensive care by 22%. An ancient genetic gift provided protection against a modern disease. We usually tell the story of history as a competition, but the evidence shows a long period of cooperation and coexistence between different kinds of humans. Modern humanity is a biological merger. We are the sum of 3 different human species who encountered one another in the ancient world and chose to become one.